I see here that you received your doctorate of public health from the University of Michigan, School of Public Health, and your BS in chemical engineering from Florida A&M. So
Yes.
can you, wow, very impressive. So Dr. Pugh, can you give me your own rendition of the difficulties of achieving so many advanced degrees, but then also like I imagine being saddled with some sort of student loan debt and like what that was like for you as a Black woman?
Sure. So I actually received my bachelor's of science from Florida A&M University, and my parents really just expected and sacrificed for their children to be able to get an education. And so my undergrad degree, I did have to take out some loans, but it wasn't a lot. And my parents were very mindful of that, trying to make sure that they did whatever they could and sacrificed in whatever way they could so that that could happen. I was also able to receive an associate's degree, so I had finished quite a bit of my coursework before I made it to Florida A&M's campus. I was able to go to a community college here and go for free because my dad worked at that college.
Wow.
And so, but where I incurred most of my debt or accrued most of my debt, it was in my master's program as well as the doctorate program at the University of Michigan. And so I was working. I received a degree in chemical engineering and had started a career path, and then realized that I really wanted to pursue a degree in public health and really take a look at how health impacts or how the environment impacts health. And when I did that, that also meant that I was taking a decrease in income. So I was paying for my college degree, but I was also paying for my cost of living as well. So all of those things were coming in together. So that's again where most of my debt came in. A lot of debt came in was in my master's program, and then in the DRPH, which is the Doctor of Public Health degree from
I,
the University of Michigan, which is a pretty expensive university.
it is, yeah.
Prestigious, worth it. And I don't regret the path that I took, but of course, I would do things differently as it relates to the debt that I accrued, and then being able to defer it, and but now having to face um, paying that back.
Right.
So.
And it sounds like you took those loans out really to support yourself, right? In addition to your tuition, but it also
Yes.
seems just like living expenses, day-to-day life, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And, as African American women, a lot of times we are the sole breadwinners or we're taking care of ourselves.
Yeah,
I did have other people in my household at that time. And so I was the one who pretty much was responsible for taking care of the household expenses, still am, but then with more people. And so a little complicated situation, as a lot of times it is.
of course.
And so that compounded the need for taking care of those expenses that I had for my household.
Of course. Yeah, it's funny. Every woman I interview more or less has the same story of what you just said. And
Hmm.
another question I have for you, because you're so accomplished, and I see that you served on the board.
I still do. I'm an elected official, and
Wow.
so I serve on the State Board of Education.
Wow, very
Yes.
impressive. Oh my gosh, I see your Shirley Chisholm poster in the back. But When you are in rooms that most of us aren't in, and you look at your white male counterparts, do you see them holding the same amount of degrees and experience as you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I also don't see them carrying the weight of all of these things that we have to be thinking about. You
Yeah.
know, we had a discussion last night with Nicole Atkins
Mhm.
about this very subject, and we did a presentation to folks, and we were giving advice to younger people, but to people my age, it is so overwhelming when we have to perform, we have to do what it is that we were called to do, and our income is not the same as our counterparts, but also because of the baggage and some of these things that we have in the back of our mind that
Yeah.
we're thinking about. How do I make ends meet? How do I make sure that my family is being fed? And then how do I make sure that this debt that we have accrued is also being taken care of? But then also, how how do I give back, um, and make all of these sacrifices that we've made work for my community?
Yeah. What?
Um, because often I know my friends and myself, I mean, like I said, I started off in chemical engineering. The reason why I started off in chemical engineering is because people said, Pam, you're good in math, you're good in science, that's where the money is. Go get a degree in chemical engineering. But I realized that was not my passion, that was not my calling. And so I had to take some steps backwards to get on the track and the path that I wanted to be on. And at different intersections of my life, I've had to stop and pause and say, do I want to go upward? Do I want to go in that direction? Or do I really need to continue this path that I'm on, that I feel is a trailblazing path, like
Mhm.
Sister Shirley, and make sure that I'm doing something that's meaningful, and again, that path that I'm called to do, and mainly for our people, because there's such a void. And so, though we have this debt, we also have this competing calling, or I do,
Yeah.
to do what I'm supposed to do, and sometimes it's not always the fastest way to be able to pay off those debts, the path that we take, but we know it's the most peaceful path to take, and we will get there. You know, I'm definitely determined to do what it is that I'm called to do, but also make sure that we make amends or correct or erase that
Mhm.
that is there. But we are often in these rooms where we are thinking about, I have that bill to pay, I have um, you
Right.
know, the different things that we have to take care of,
Right.
plus uh, we are weighted by also wondering why it is that we're not making the same income as our counterparts, that we often are far more outpaced
Mhm.
as it relates to the education that we work so hard to get. I worked very hard,
Yeah.
and paid for the education that I have.
Mhm.
And you are correct. Often not receiving equitable pay as
Mhm.
those that we're in the room with.
Yeah. And then I imagine when you aren't paid equitably, there are certain sacrifices you have to make that those counterparts don't have to think about. And they have like the leverage, the time, the ability to, to maybe I don't know. I've never been an elected official, but I imagine there are a lot of sacrifices that come with it,
There
that
are,
you're not afforded.
yeah, and the office that I hold is a volunteer position, but I work very hard. And those of us who are of color and women, we often find that we there's so much more expected of us.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's because we set the bar high for ourselves, and because we go into these spaces not because we're looking for attention, not because we need another platform or spotlight, but it's because we really are there to make a difference. And when we're talking about a position such as a state board of education position, when we're talking about K through 12 children, and we're talking about at a time such as this, where we're taught where it's COVID,
Mm,
COVID on top of already dire conditions for many of our Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, our people of color. It's so important uh, that we are everywhere, and
exactly.
so and that's not also necessary, but people begin to or just expect that of us. So it is a lot. It is a lot to compete with. So I do my share of volunteer work on top of the fact that the degrees that I have, I put those degrees to use. I
Yeah.
put them to use so it's to the benefit of the greater good, and I pay for it in more ways than one.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would love to hear your thoughts on President Biden's promise to cancel $50,000 of federal student loan debt while he was on his campaign. And he's quickly retracted that and kind of dodged it when asked about it now. How do you feel about that?
Well, as an African American female who teamed up with so many other African American females to be committed to the party
Yeah.
and committed to the campaign of Biden and Vice President Harris, it is beyond disappointing, and it's what we expect. And when we expect, when we voted, that is something that we expected, and that is something that we're sure that he's going to carry through with. I couldn't imagine that not happening, and so it does need to happen.
Ab-
There are those of us who work so hard for that campaign, who are out here working so hard, and just trying to make sure that the very things that he stands for are being operationalized on the ground. And so we deserve and we need and we expect for that campaign promise to be followed through on.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think for me, what's really disappointing, I don't know if you share this as well, is that Vice President Harris, like not only is a Black woman, but went to an HBCU, which are like notorious for being super expensive. And I would have hoped, like they promised on the campaign, that like that would be at the top of their agenda, like you said, which is why we pushed for them to get into office. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like Black women are so valued, like when people need them for something. But then, of course, as soon as they get what they need, like all of Black women's priorities go to the bottom of the list. You know?
Hmm. Yes. And then when we decide to stand up and bring that out, just what you said, bring it up, bring it out, call it out because we have to,
Yeah,
then we are difficult people.
exactly.
Um, but oh well, we
Oh wow.
deserve we deserve what we are owed, and again we continue to work very hard um, to keep this country afloat. Our democracy is beyond at stake at a time such as this, and Black women have been, again, that committed block that has kept this country afloat. Where would we be without Black women?
Literally.
When we talk about Vice President Harris, she and I both belong to a sisterhood that promotes everything that we're talking about right here, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
Yeah.
um, when there was the decision being made about who would be the vice president, I wrote an op ed that got national attention. And I talked about my mom. I talked about my great grandmother who cared for so many children.
Mhm.
They were the ones who helped, who were in the homes, and they were the homekeepers, the housekeepers of white women. And
Mhm.
so the time is now for us to get what we are owed. And we could talk about this uh, from so many different aspects. But Black women have always been there. We can talk about the liberation um, um, movement where we worked hard to make sure that women had the right to vote and had rights, the women's
Mhm.
suffrage movement. But we were the last to benefit from that movement that
Absolutely.
we fought so hard for. So we could go on, we could go on, and we could go on. Each of us could give our own personal experiences of how we've been overqualified. I won't say overqualified. We've been appropriately qualified, but someone has been able to move in and take advantage of opportunities that should have been there for us. We can talk about the fact that we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We can talk about the fact that we talked about affirmative action. But often,
Absolutely.
when we say that we're talking about programs and opportunities like that to bring about equity, to right past wrongs or wrongs of the past, but we're still the last to benefit from those things that are said to be intended to right the systemic inequalities that continue to exist and continue to place Black women at the bottom of the rung, no matter what we're talking about. We can talk about, my background is health, and we talk about our babies that are being born. And there's data that shows that Black women, give birth to babies, and the outcomes of those babies are worse than that of women who have far less of an income level. And
Yeah.
that's because of the stressors that we carry, the burdens that we carry, whether we're talking about the loans, the student loans that we've had to take out, many of us because our families did not have wealth to hand down. Many of us because we're having to compensate for this inequity in pay, inequity in other spaces. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
but the burdens that we care, it's even bearing out when we have children, and the health consequences that come with the next generation
Yeah.
because of no us policymakers talking the talk, but not doing what it's required to really break these cycles. And so we
Absolutely.
deserve what we were promised.